What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over the top 5 fantasy football gems. And what do we mean by that? Well, in the draft, there are a few players that based on their ADP, they really stand out from the players around them. It doesn't necessarily mean you should target them in every situation, but by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why these players stand out from those amongst them. But before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which running back with at least 110 carries saw the least amount of stacked boxes of 8+ defenders. The answer to that, Todd Gurley. It just goes to show you exactly how much teams respected the passing game of the Rams. And the winner, Sanatan Serif. Congratulations. And today's question, of receivers with at least 70 targets, which receiver had the least amount of separation? And I'll repeat, of receivers with at least 70+ targets, which receiver had the least amount of separation? Leave your answer in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. But let's move over to the top 5 fantasy football gems. And for a little clarity, these gems are all based off ESPN ADP. It's draft week, it is the most popular platform, and although their ADP is a little wonky, it's what most of us have to use. So each player may have made this list for a different reason, but by the end of this video, it will be pretty clear why they were added to this list. It is in no particular order, and to start this list, we have Latavius Murray. So Latavius Murray is a very interesting player that even though the offense that he's on and his projected role in the offense, people still aren't that interested in drafting him. On ESPN, he's coming off the board as the 108th player overall. That means theoretically, you could draft 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a quarterback, and still be able to draft Latavius Murray. I in no way expected him to fall this far this late in the offseason, and if your draft is coming up, make sure he is on your radar. He makes a great target for those who had a late first round pick and may have got 2 strong receivers as opposed to a really strong running back core. And I say that because he has immediate value to have a role in this offense because he's filling the vacated position of Mark Ingram. And in 2017, Ingram had his best season of his entire career. He had over 1,100 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, and even had 58 receptions for another 416 yards. That's over 1,500 total yards of offense that he had during that one season, and Alvin Kamara was still productive himself. Now, last season, he did have a dip in usage, but you could also attribute that to the New Orleans Saints preparing to be without him. Now, he still had 645 yards on the ground, and he certainly wasn't used as much in the receiving game. That was more for Alvin Kamara, but he still was able to get another 170 yards, a receiving touchdown, his 7th touchdown in just 12 games. Now you're telling me that type of production could be handed over to Latavius Murray. I don't think Latavius Murray is as strong of a running back and as skilled of a player, but it is very important that they keep Alvin Kamara healthy. The only way they're going to do that is to relieve him from some touches. I would believe that Latavius Murray could be started right away in your fantasy lineup, but if you want to use him as effectively as possible, I would suggest only starting him in the games where the Saints should be blowing out their opponents. Reason being, there's no reason to put Alvin Kamara in harm's way if the game has already gotten out of hand. Ingram's best performances last season, Washington, Tampa Bay, even the Eagles were blown out 48-7. Ingram rushed for over 103 yards and scored twice. So yes, it's probably best to trust Latavius as a starter in games that the Saints should completely blow out their opponents. Now, in the beginning of the season, it should be a little difficult to know exactly which teams have the ability to be blown out, but the Saints are going to be one of the best offenses in the league. While the season hasn't started and we don't want to make too many assumptions, it shouldn't take very long for us to know which teams are going to be struggling. So Latavius Murray being drafted outside of the top 100 when he has immediate value is a complete oversight by any drafters passing him up. There's even players like Royce Freeman and Peyton Barber who are being drafted ahead of him and likely don't even have the immediate value that Latavius Murray brings. And if anything happens to Alvin Kamara, it's almost a guarantee that he would be an RB1. Yes, they would bring someone in to be used in the receiving game, but he 100% would lead this team in touches. And the running back on the Saints leading in touches, that's an every week start regardless of matchup. Real quick guys, make sure you're checking out our draft package currently on sale at thefantasyfootballadvice.com. It has all of the rankings you could need for your draft, player breakdowns, risk ratings, and access to our private community group, all for one low price. So if that interests you, go ahead and check the link in the description box below. Sign up and become a member today. I'm going to move over to a wide receiver, and I'm going to be combining two players here because I know not everybody wants to draft the player we're the highest on, and that's Christian Kirk. So really, this is going to be for the Arizona Cardinals receivers. Right now, Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are being drafted back-to-back outside of the top 36 receivers. Right now, Christian Kirk is being drafted 95th overall, and Larry Fitzgerald is being drafted 99th overall. Now I get it, earlier on in the preseason, Kyler Murray did not look good, but he's a rookie. We know there's going to be some inconsistencies in the play, and they weren't going to completely unveil their offense. But he's made great improvements. In fact, his last game, he completed 67% of his passes for 137 yards. It was really promising to see him connecting with his targets. Christian Kirk himself, he did only catch 2 of his 6 targets, resulting in just 5 yards, but 6 targets in a preseason game where they didn't even finish just goes to show you how involved he is going to be in this offense. Larry Fitzgerald, he's not going to be playing as much in the preseason, so it's difficult to say if that target market share would decrease with him on the field, but regardless, there's going to be enough production to go around, and likely Fitzgerald and Kirk are going to be the main targets on an offense that's expected to run the most plays in the entire NFL. And I know there are you guys out there that do believe this offense is going to be terrible. Just make sure you're factoring in for garbage time, because if they're down 2+ scores in the fourth quarter, they could be airing it out, resulting in a ton of fantasy points for the receivers. It's one of the reasons we like David Johnson so much. He's going to see the ball as much as any running back in the entire league. Now, I haven't drafted Larry Fitzgerald, nor have I targeted him, but he's falling in drafts much further than Christian Kirk. So if you do want to get a piece of this offense and Kirk is drafted early, I've seen Larry Fitzgerald falling a round or 2 past his ADP, and just a season ago, he was being drafted as a top 24 receiver. Larry Fitzgerald does not look all that bad, but you definitely So we're moving back over to running back, and the next player up is Toni Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. And answer me this, with Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott holding out, we see Austin Eckler being drafted in like the 6th round. Well, Ezekiel Elliott left a giant hole in the Dallas Cowboys running game, and that appears to be filled by Toni Pollard. What we've seen from this preseason is Pollard is opening up as the starting running back, and the kid, he's not that bad. He broke away for a 20-yard rush. He currently has 84 yards and a touchdown on just 15 carries, and it's not like they're not using him in the receiving game. He has 3 receptions for 19 yards. The team, they've been vocal. They do want to have a role for Toni Pollard even when Ezekiel Elliott returns. Austin Eckler is being drafted right around RB30. Toni Pollard, RB47. You try to look for things in the draft that just don't add up, and this is one of those things. They didn't spend a super high pick on him, but a 4th round pick who's in the 73rd percentile in his 40 time, 67th percentile speed score, and 58th percentile burst score. Behind that Dallas O-line, he could do some serious damage, and they have a very weak opening schedule. I know we don't want to put too much weight on the opening schedule, but we have already mentioned that the Dallas Cowboys defense is a really solid one to target. They face the New York Giants, the Washington Redskins, and rounded out in week 3 against the Dolphins, who were completely slashed by running backs last season. Now, it's not a guarantee those defenses will look just as bad as they did a season ago, but if he's the starting running back on the Dallas Cowboys and you were able to grab him with a 13th round pick, Now, that is some serious value. And right now, not many people are really targeting him. I'm not sure how much longer that will last, but we're in the final week where most people are drafting, and at 156 overall, he definitely stands out from the players around him. So jumping back over to wide receiver, we have a player that we haven't brought up all that much as of late, but he still makes a great target, and he's coming in much cheaper on ESPN than he is in all the other platforms. That's Marquez ValdesScantling of the Green Bay Packers. Now, ValdesScantling, he is a bit riskier than some of the other players on this list, but at the same time, he's also extremely cheap. So if it doesn't work out with him, you can easily drop him for the next waiver wire target. But as it stands today, Marquez ValdesScantling is being drafted as the 51st receiver off the board. So yes, he could be your wide receiver 5. Even in a bye week, even hit with injuries, there would be no logical reason you would need to start him early. Geronimo Allison, he's being taken several spots ahead of him. And while taking a shot on Allison is not a bad pick as well, Scantling, he's got the speed. He runs a 4.37 40. He's been working out with Randy Moss, and last season we did see glimpses of the potential upside he has. He had 2 100-yard games within a 3-week span. He also scored twice in a separate 3-week span, and he did that on minimal targets. So if you're talking about a player who's fighting for a role, who doesn't need all that many targets to produce, but is expected to see much more field time than he did last season, A plus B typically equals C, and for him to consistently be available late in drafts in the same area of Tyrell Williams, Kenny Stills, Golden Tate, tell me which one really has the most upside if all things fall their way. To me, it's ValdesScantling 100% of the time. So the last player we have on this list is Hunter Henry of the Los Angeles Chargers. And I know that everyone is completely familiar with Hunter Henry at this point. We all know the type of upside he has, but the reason he is such a gem is because in ESPN leagues, he is being discounted heavily. Not like the 63rd overall pick is cheap, because yes, that is in the 6th round, but when we talk about values, when we talk about players being good picks or not, it's all relative to where they're going versus the other players at their position. And throughout this offseason, we have always valued Hunter Henry in the same tier as players like Evan Engram. Well, in ESPN leagues, to get Evan Engram on your team, you need to spend the last pick in the 4th round. Hunter Henry, you can get him in the early 6th round. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone. You want to make sure that you're not sacrificing balance on your team. But considering there are no real tight ends that are being drafted after Hunter Henry that stand out as clear and consistent contributors at the tight end position that you're just going to set in your lineup every week, that makes Henry a real gem considering he is coming in at the cheapest cost of any of the tight ends in that tier. He hasn't had a ton of usage in the preseason, but that should be of no concern. Last game he did catch 2 of 2 targets, and it bodes well that they were willing to put him in a preseason game. If he had any signs of injury, they would definitely rest him. They have playoff aspirations, and they have never brought a full healthy receiving core to the playoffs. So if there was any risk of injury, Hunter Henry would not be in the lineup. Speaking of injuries, he has the opportunity to not just be the red zone threat, but to get additional work between the 20s if anything were to happen to Mike Williams, Travis Benjamin, or even Keenan Allen. Basically, if any of the receivers get hurt, you can guarantee his target market share increases right away. And the receivers on this team haven't necessarily been super healthy throughout their careers. And with Melvin Gordon potentially missing time due to the holdout, the red zone upside he has to start the season, that's extremely valuable. Melvin Gordon has been one of the most heavily used running backs in the red zone, and we saw with Mike Williams getting double-digit touchdowns on such few targets. With Melvin Gordon on the field, a lot of that production is going to go Hunter Henry's way. So to potentially see him falling in drafts and being a guy you can plug in your lineup at the tight end position week in, week out, that's definitely a gem in my book. But that's going to do it for today's video. We really hope you enjoyed. If you did, how about you hit that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.